to discuss issues related to database lock and regulatory guidelines as they pertain to data management. Database locking is the process of preventing any further modifications of study data in a database. At the point of database locking, data has already been cleaned and is ready for statistical analysis. Once the database lock has occurred, no data will be changed for the purposes of study analysis. There are two kinds of locks as it pertains to study databases. One is called a soft lock, and some companies have a soft lock when all case report forms have been received from the sites. At this point, the last query response has also been received from the sites, and the quality control team will start quality control checks. These are similar to the quality control checks that you have been completing in the last couple weeks of this course. They will do a 100% quality control check of a sample of subjects from the study, meaning they will select a random sample of study subjects and then check all of the data points on those subjects. At this point, edit rights to the database are removed from the clinical database management team. Only the project lead can edit any data in the study database. Edit rights could be granted again temporarily if corrections need to be made, if errors or omissions are found in the study database. A hard lock is completed after the database audit is complete and any audit findings are addressed. Edit rights at this point are removed from the entire clinical data management team, including the project lead. No edits can be made to the data after this point, and any future edits would require unlocking. Unlocking a database is sometimes necessary to resolve SAE or adverse event reconciliation issues. This is because the SAE database or AE database is kept separately from the main study database off of the SAE report forms that are supplied by study sites to the central center. Unlocking of the database is a big deal and requires an audit trail. It needs to be documented why the study database has been unlocked and data changed, and it would be done by somebody such as the statistician, the project manager, or the sponsor. Unlocking of the database should never be performed after the data set has been unblinded, because this could introduce bias into the data set. For example, someone could accuse the study sponsor of trying to alter study results after results were looked at by the data management team and showed, for example, their product to be worse than another product. So adverse events or things like that should not be changed after the study has been unblinded. If audits need to be performed, it's better to perform some early. We sometimes audit 100% of key fields for the study database, meaning you would check all the data in key fields such as your outcome fields or your treatment fields for the study database. Data managers may also audit a sample of records for quality control purposes, as I mentioned earlier. This could be a random sample or a certain sample of sets from a site that was thought to maybe be a less than optimal site. During an audit, a review of the text fields for transcription or entry errors should be performed. And during the audit phase, descriptive statistics and graphs should be performed or made to check for outliers of numeric fields, missing data, or misplaced decimal places. These are similar to the types of audits that we have been doing over the past couple weeks in this course. Reconciling may need to be performed. This most often applies to SAE data, as I mentioned. The SAE data system is kept separately from the clinical data management system for the main study data. The SAEs are reported on SAE forms by the study sites to the FDA and the sponsor, and there may be differences in the event information, in the case information, and the number of deaths or the dates that are recorded in between the two systems. So these reported in the clinical data management system for those adverse events, and any discrepancies need to be reconciled. Another area where reconciliation may need performed is due to the IVRS, or the Interactive Voice Response System that's used to enter study patients. When someone is entered into the study, the pharmacist at the site or the investigator at the site gives certain information to the IVRS system. For example, like the patient initials, the patient age, and the date of study entry. These may be different than what was captured in the clinical data management system. So fields like that need to be reconciled between the two systems, as well as the treatment group assignment for the patient. Anything else that's captured on paper might also need to be reconciled with the CDM system. Source data verification also should occur. This is when a clinical research associate goes out to the clinical sites and verifies that the data matches what's in the source documents at the site. So they look at the data in the CDM system or in the electronic CRF and verify it from data directly from the medical record, for example. They identify any discrepancies, and these are validated and verified, corrected in the CDM system before database lock occurs. Investigators must sign that all data has been collected and verified according to 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. Discrepancies discovered during closeout generate queries, and the investigator must re-sign again once these queries have been rectified. This is an example lockout checklist for an electronic data capture study. These are some of the tasks, for example, that all data have been received and coded, coding was reviewed and approved, SAEs were reconciled and approved, queries were resolved or closed, approval to lock was obtained, they request all records to be marked as locked, and request site PDFs, and then they initial and date that these procedures have been performed. The FDA has certain guidelines regarding maintenance of electronic records and electronic signatures as they pertain to clinical research studies. The FDA has interpreted Part 11 of Title 21 of the CFR as it applies to records in electronic form that are created, modified, maintained, archived, retrieved, or transmitted under any records requirements set forth in the FDA regulations. Part 11 also applies to electronic records submitted to the FDA under the FDA Cosmetics Act and the Public Health Service Act, even if such records are not specifically identified in agency regulations. Key areas of these regulations apply to study protocols, standard operating procedures, source documentation, and retention. For example, how long records need to be retained after a study is closed. Internal security safeguards, meaning that a database should have limited access, require the use of passwords, enable audit trails, and you remember that Microsoft Access itself does not have an audit trail feature built into it, so Access databases, unless modified in a special way, will not be FDA compliant. The database has date and time stamps on it for when any data is changed or modified, and external security safeguards relative to the study data sets. The FDA regulations also address other system features such as direct data entry, retrieving data, dependability system documentation, meaning are backups created and how often, system controls and change controls, again, to allow a trail. Training of personnel is covered under this, including training of individuals who develop, maintain, or use computerized systems for the study data, in that they must have the appropriate education, training, and experience necessary to perform their assigned tasks. This means basically that each person that's going to be entering or accessing study data must complete some sort of training specific to the study protocol supplied by the sponsor or the CRO working with the sponsor on the study. The computer education training, and experience of each individual should be documented, including certificates and CVs. So that wraps up what we're going to talk about in terms of database lock and regulatory guidelines for this week. I look forward to hearing more in the discussion boards from you, and I hope you have a great week.